Do you want that punk sound to your bass? You know that What's My Age sound to your bass? I bet you do, and I'm gonna show you how to do it today. So yeah, how cool does that sound? I think that bass sounds awesome. This is a multi-episode series in my channel where I reverse engineer What's My Age Again. I started with the drums in the last video, so if you haven't watched that, make sure you go back and watch that one first, so you are at the same spot that I am here right now. And today we're gonna do bass, and we're gonna do it using only Ableton Live plugins. So let's start. Bass is a very simple, very nice instrument to be, because it only takes one track, which is awesome. I wish every instrument only took one track, but bass does. Yeah, of course, you can record line and amp, but because I'm using only Ableton plugins and I want you to be able to do the same thing that I'm doing at your home, I just recorded my bass, line in, directly into my interface. And this is how the bass sounds directly recorded into my interface. Kind of boring, right? It still is a cool bass sound, because I must admit I have a bit of an advantage because I have a precision bass, which is closer to the Blink sound, right? It's not a Mark Hoppus precision bass, but still is a precision bass. So it gets me quite close to the sound that I need to be in anyways. But a lot of the bass sound is actually in your playing, the way that you use the pick, where you use the pick, how strong you pick your bass. When I recorded this bass, to be honest, I found that the closest to Mark that I sounded was when I was playing right on top of the pickup. So you know where the pickup is, I just picked there, and I didn't play as strongly as I thought I should, and as I would play it in a live set, for example, where I'm excited and playing hard. I kind of pulled back my string a little bit to make sure that I still have the transients coming through, because the transients in the bass of a punk song are very important, but also you need that sustain. And if you play too strong, the sustain is gonna sound off, because you're gonna give too much focus to the transient. It's gonna go like, and the transient is gonna overshadow the sustain, and it's not gonna be cool. So make sure you achieve a nice balance of strength so you can keep your transients and your sustain sounding quite nice. Do you guys want me to do a video about actually playing bass? Not a good bass player, but if you want, I can try. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, so yeah, this is the bass directly to my interface right here, and this is the bass with all of this crazy processing going in here. Alright, so you see, it sounds still like the original bass, but it has a lot of little things to it that makes it sound way closer to Mark's bass. So let's go from the beginning. You see, when I listen to the original bass in What's My Age Again, right? I have the impression that they recorded it through a Sans Amp pedal. I might be wrong. I have no resources on how they recorded this song, right? So I'm guessing. But it kind of had an overdriven Sans Amp sound, at least to my ears. So the first thing that I did is put a pedal plugin onto it and just use the overdrive setting, raise the gain just a little bit, because when you actually put the pedal plugin in Ableton Live, even when it's at 0%, it's already overdriving things a little bit. I just wanted that little crusty Sans Amp sound there, and I boosted the gain just a little bit, but I also EQ'd my bass here a little bit as well, as if I was playing live, I would probably EQ my bass on my pedal and my amp. So I did that a little bit here, and this is how it sounds before and after. You see, it's adding a lot of mids, and a punk bass needs more mids than you think, because the guitar is not going to be able to cover it the whole time. So always remember to boost your mids when you're doing punk bass. I also have my mix 95%. I wanted a little bit of the original bass coming through. So if you have the dry wet there, why not use it, right? 95%. Very mellow, still using it though. Every little step counts. Next step, I started looking for a amp preset here in Ableton. When you go into the plugins here in Ableton, if you click the little arrow, right, this is a very important trick that a lot of people miss in Ableton. Ableton actually comes with a lot of presets. You just have to remember to click this little arrow here. So you see, I started trying out these bass presets here, and I tried this bass roundup one, but it didn't sound quite right to me, and I started playing with the bass amp here in Ableton Live, and it still didn't sound quite right to me. But when I accidentally switched to the blues amp, which should be a guitar amp, right, not a bass amp, it gave me the top end that I needed for my bass to sound more punky. I don't know, it just gave me a little bit of a air that I needed for that bass on top. So let's just hear without and with, so you can kind of understand the craziness that I'm talking now. You see, it gives me that amp sound, and it gives me that string sound. It makes the bottom end rounder. It mellows out the extreme boost that I gave to the mids there before. That's why I'm even boosting the mids again here. But it brings the whole bass together, like it glues it together almost. And it's funny that I had to use the blues amp for this, but it's just, sometimes you gotta use your ear and not just trust the names on the things you're using, right? Just use your ears. Go through the different amps. There's no shame in using a guitar amp for the bass. No shame. And as you can see, I'm putting the gain up a little bit more just to give it more, even more of a crunch. And I think it sounds pretty awesome. Just listen to it again. Do you hear that string sound right at the top there? That's so necessary for punk bass, so necessary. And sometimes people focus too much on the bass and forget that for a punk bass to sound sloppy and stringy and fun, you need that top stringy sound bouncing up there. I'm always gonna use the blues amp for that now. Now that I know that it does this, I'm gonna keep it in my heart forever. Next step is hybrid reverb. Now, like, what the fuck, Julian? Why are you using reverb on bass? People don't do that. That's gonna mess up your mix. A lot of times it would, but if you know me, you know that I have a little trick to use cabinet simulations in hybrid reverb. Because hybrid reverb, if you put it in convolution mode here, and you don't use the algorithms, the reverb stuff, you just use the convolution, it basically becomes an impulse response loader. Again, I have a whole YouTube Shorts video about that, so it's gonna take you 1 minute to watch it, really. I explain this process, why I use hybrid reverb as a cabinet simulator. But this is what it is. It's simulating a cabinet. And unfortunately, Ableton doesn't come with cabinet simulations here yet, so I had to download some free ones online. I'm gonna leave the links below to the impulse responses I used, but they're free. You see, I'm using an MPEG SVT cabinet impulse response because I believe that Mark used MPEG stuff, and this is the closest thing that I had. So here we go. I'm using an MPEG simulation. Hybrid reverb is acting like a cabinet, so we have the amp head right here, you see, the blues amp head, and then we have the cabinet. Just think of this. I'm gonna even rename it for you guys. Cabinet. This is not hybrid reverb. This is a cabinet, okay? It's just loading that sound. It's just convoluting that cabinet sound into my bass sound, which is awesome, really. So this is before and after. Isn't it crazy how much this sounds like it's coming out of a cabinet in a room? It's completely different. And it's amazing because I was happy with my bass sound in the beginning already, but every little step that I take takes me closer to Mark's bass in this song. It's really a process of listening the original track and trying to get closer and closer and closer every time, and just trying to simulate what they done. They had to use a pedal, they had to use an amp head, they had to use a cabinet, and I'm just trying to simulate those steps here in the virtual world of Ableton. Also very important when you're using this as a cabinet simulator, pre-delay to 0, you don't need any pre-delay, and you can mix the dry and wet. A lot of times, as I said before, when you record bass, you record a line in and you record an amp in. The amp in going through the amp, through a mic, into the console, and the line in directly from the bass to the console. That way you can EQ and mix both together to have an optimal bass sound. And here I'm doing essentially that. I have mixed in a lot of the cabinets, and I still have a little bit of the line going through right here, which is awesome. Next step, EQ, heavy EQ, because now I'm trying to match that Mark sound all the way, right? So this is before. I'm bringing that, you see, listen to that, it's hard to explain. I'm not good with words. I'm a foreigner as well, so it's even harder for me. But listen to that, listen to it. You're gonna hear it now. This is without a and now listen to the I'm bringing it up because I just heard it on Mark's bass. It took me so long to EQ this bass because every time I was like, it just doesn't sound the same. And I gotta thank Rick Beato for this, because Rick Beato actually made a video about this song, how it was produced, and he played the multi-tracks so I could hear to the bass soloed. So I went to his video and I just listened to it like, oh man, it doesn't sound the same. EQ'd it a little bit, EQ'd it a little bit. And sometimes to get the sound that you want, you really have to go to the original source and try to copy it as best as you can. And from that point on, you can develop your own bass sound. But starting with a copy, it's always a good start. All right, the next step is compression. You always need compression for bass just to make it a little bit more controlled. Bass is a very sensitive instrument to the way you play it. So sometimes you play it a little bit too soft, sometimes you play it a little bit too hard. So you just need to control it a little bit. So I'm just controlling the bass a little bit here. It's not making a massive difference to the sound at all. It's just really controlling transients and making the sustain a little bit more present. So you just hear it come together a little bit. This is a trick I learned from Adam Neely. He's a jazz bass player here on YouTube, and he uses Ableton. He posted a video once saying that he always uses these two presets in Ableton Live. So if you come here to Saturator, right? There's these two presets, warm up highs and warm up lows. He always puts that on bass. And again, as I said before, you always need to add that saturation stage to your tracks when you're mixing digitally, just to give that pleasant analog sound to your mix. And as he found out, these two presets are the best to warm up the lows of your bass and warm up the highs of your bass. So listen to the difference. It's very subtle, but it's bringing harmonics into the bass, and it's gonna help your bass not only sound better, but also come through better in smaller speakers. You always need to add saturation to bass when you're mixing, because that's the way people are gonna be able to listen to your bass. When they listen to your song on a phone, a small radio, a small speaker, always put saturation tastefully on bass. And the last step, more EQ. I'm stacking EQs again, because I like the move that I did on this EQ here. I brought the wah 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 up, I was happy, and I didn't want to mess with it. But I still listened to the Mark bass solo, and I was like, fuck, man, it's still not quite there. So I had to boost more high end. When you listen to the whole track, this bass is really cutting through, especially in the high end. So I had to make it more aggressive in the high end. It was just me copying Mark's bass. I have a little bit of a boost here in the low mids because I needed more of a body as well. Not much, you see, not much though. And a lot of a boost in the high mids and a high shelf. Just to, man, I need those strings to come through. I need this bass to cut through just like Mark's bass cuts through. So I did it. I made it happen. And this is how it sounds before and after. And that's it. That's my whole processing on my bass. It's a lot, but again, bass only takes one track, so it kind of deserves some love, doesn't it? Let's hear it before and after with the whole thing again. And now in the mix.
We started making out and she took off my pants, but then I turned on the TV. And that's about the time she walked away from me. Nobody likes you when you play. And I still wanna.
And that's it for the bass. We did it. We did it. One more video down. Next video, we're gonna go down to guitars. Guitars were so hard. It's very hard to make guitars sound good without an actual amp. Like, things are getting better now with cool amp simulators, but I could only use Ableton's amp sim, right? So I had to make a lot of moves to make these guitars sound like Tom DeLonge's guitars. So make sure you subscribe so you can get the next video in your subscription box, and press all these buttons around me in this world here that help me, and I see you all next time. Thank you and bye.
That's about the time she walked away from